The Austrian Grand Prix is often billed as a sprint weekend with straight-line flair and tight margins. But this year, it carries a different kind of weight, a strategic pause before the storm of Silverstone. In the compressed cadence of a triple header, the Red Bull Ring becomes more than just a high-altitude circuit tucked in the Styrian hills. It's the battleground for decisions made behind closed doors, where some teams bring the future forward while others hold it back for the home-soil spectacle of the British Grand Prix. That creates a tension that isn't visible in the timing screens. Yet Ferrari, once again cloaked in ambiguity, has hinted at a key suspension or floor update. But no one on the grid can say with certainty what will appear on the SF25 when the garage shutters lift on Friday. Mercedes, fresh off a momentum-shifting podium, arrives with quiet confidence and a confirmed upgrade path. Aston Martin and Red Bull, meanwhile, are playing the long game, using Austria as a data-gathering stopgap. And McLaren. That's the wild card. Rear-limited grip and race-long tire stress could break their recent rhythm, even with Lando Norris approaching one of his most statistically successful circuits. This weekend isn't about who brings the biggest parts, it's about who reads the chessboard one move ahead. In a championship where every fraction of performance must be measured against long-term strategy, Austria becomes the perfect inflection point. What happens here may define who arrives at Silverstone already in control. From a technical standpoint, the Austrian Grand Prix presents a deceptively complex challenge. At just over 4 kilometers in length with only 10 corners, it appears simplistic on paper. But the demands it places on power unit deployment, rear traction, and brake stability are anything but. That's why the upgrades coming into this weekend carry extra weight, not necessarily in scale, but in specificity. Ferrari's rumored rear suspension adjustment is the most anticipated change in the paddock, and for good reason. Since switching to pull rod architecture over the winter, the Scuderia has battled an inconsistent balance window that forces them to run higher ride heights to maintain predictability. This, in turn, has compromised low-speed traction and mid-corner rotation, both critical at turns like T3 and T4 in Austria, where mechanical grip out of hairpins dictates your run into the DRS zones. If Ferrari does introduce a revised rear suspension geometry here, particularly with altered linkage angles or anti-squat characteristics, it could finally unlock the lower ride height setup they've been chasing all year. Alternatively, if the update is focused on the floor, as some insiders suggest, we may see a subtler change, increased downforce efficiency through tighter channeling of underbody airflow, aimed at stabilizing the car in medium-speed transitions like turns 6 and 7. Meanwhile, Mercedes has confirmed new components, though the specifics remain guarded. Given their recent gains in rotation and traction, it's plausible they are refining their rear aero platform or making minor suspension tuning tweaks to capitalize on the low-grip asphalt. With tire degradation expected to be modest, any aerodynamic or mechanical grip enhancement could swing the weekend. This isn't about revolution, it's about extracting that extra tenth per sector. And in a race where track position is everything, that tenth could decide the outcome of both the sprint and the Grand Prix. While the technical upgrades may dictate lap time, it's the human element that decides how those tools are wielded under pressure. Nowhere is that clearer than within the intra-team dynamics simmering beneath the surface at the top squads. At Ferrari, Charles Leclerc knows the window to assert himself as the team's undisputed leader is closing fast. He's spent much of the season wrestling a car that doesn't bend to his driving style. Now, with the potential of a rear suspension fix on the horizon, all eyes are on whether he can extract the edge over Lewis Hamilton, who's adapted to the SF25 with unnerving precision. Hamilton, for his part, brings an almost surgical approach to high-altitude tracks like Austria, where braking stability and energy recovery synchronization are key. The risk. If the upgrades favor Hamilton's smoother input style, the internal power balance at Ferrari may quietly shift before Silverstone even arrives. Over at McLaren, the narrative sharpens around Lando Norris. This is his track, statistically, emotionally, and reputationally. But with Oscar Piastri growing bolder in wheel-to-wheel scenarios and a car that might struggle with rear-end consistency, Norris's authority could be tested. One mistake in the sprint, one misread in tire phase transitions, and the psychological upper hand could evaporate. And then there's Mercedes. George Russell may be the experienced hand, but with Kimi Antonelli's recent podium igniting a new wave of speculation and expectation, every qualifying lap becomes a statement. Austria's layout demands trust in the rear axle and late braking finesse, traits Russell has, but so does Antonelli, whose raw pace is now matched by tangible results. This weekend, across the grid, The upgrades may change the cars, but it's the drivers who must prove they've evolved fast enough to match them. Austria doesn't just deliver points. It compresses the timeline, with both a sprint and a Grand Prix on offer. There are 34 points available to any driver who nails the weekend perfectly, and with just over a third of the season remaining, that kind of haul can either reignite a title bid or bury it. For Max Verstappen, the numbers are unforgiving. After a string of results that included tire degradation woes in Canada and a strategic stumble in Monaco, his cushion at the top of the championship has thinned. He still leads, but both Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc are within a single DNF's reach, particularly in a sprint format where even small errors are magnified. Verstappen's dominance in Austria over the last 3 years makes him the statistical favorite, but without a major upgrade this weekend, Red Bull risks falling into that uncomfortable zone of being competitive but catchable. McLaren, on the other hand, are in a points optimization phase. They know Silverstone may offer a stronger technical package, but Austria offers high reward with relatively low risk, minimal tire wear and historically clean races. If Norris can podium in both events, the title fight could swing before home turf even becomes a factor. And then there's Ferrari, whose double-scoring opportunity hinges on how quickly Hamilton can adapt to whichever component gets the green light. Constructors' math becomes critical too. Mercedes is now within range of Ferrari, while McLaren eyes Red Bull's tail. A strong weekend in Spielberg won't seal any titles, but it could define who's still in the hunt by mid-season. Austria has a curious habit of being more than just a race. It's a reflection point, a mid-season mirror that often reveals the trajectory of a team's year. Think back to 2020, when Mercedes rolled in with dual-axis steering and redefined brake management mid-race. Or 2022, when Ferrari's floor updates briefly turned the tide against Red Bull, only for reliability to claw it back weeks later. Even last year, McLaren's dramatic turnaround began with a subtle but crucial upgrade debuting here: new side pods and floor tweaks that set the stage for Norris's late-season charge.